All right. All right, how's everybody doing? You having a good time here in Las Vegas? Glad you guys are here. My name is Rob Roderick. I'm with the National Tile Contractors Association. And if you haven't been with us, we've been going through our reference manual. I don't know if you guys aren't familiar with our reference manual, but it's a terrific resource, and it's set up really simple to use. It's set up in a problem, cause, cure format. I do want to introduce you to our training staff here. Our newest member is Melissa Swan. She's going to be helping us today. And you guys probably know this rock star we have over here. He just won a NTCA Rock Star Award, Matt Wellner, who's one of our trainers as well. And they're going to be helping me teach out of our NTCA reference manual in Chapter 3 on membranes. All right, so we've got a variety of membranes that are mentioned throughout the TCNA. And one thing you'll find out about the NTCA is we teach towards industry standards that are found in the Tile Council North America Handbook and also in ANSI. It talks about, in the reference manual, a cleavage membrane. This wouldn't, in some parts of the country, people look at this as a crack isolation membrane, but this isn't a crack isolation membrane. It could be used in an unbonded mortar bed system. Whenever there's some kind of structural things that might be going on, it can separate that structural movement. And it's just tar paper. There's a variety of listed items that can work as a cleavage membrane. This is just one of them. We're going to talk about three particular types of membranes today. We're going to talk about waterproof membranes, crack isolation membranes, and sound reduction membranes. They all have ANSI standards. So we have ANSI standards for how we install things, and we have ANSI standards for the products themselves. For instance, the waterproofing, we have an ANSI standard of ANSI A108.10. And with the crack isolation, if we want to make sure that that material functions as a waterproofer, it needs to be tested and meet that standard. With crack isolation, ANSI A108.12 and sound reduction .13. All right, so what we've got here, just as a quick review, in our earlier segments, we talked about flattening substrates. In the process, we found a floor that was kind of screwed up, and we did some self-leveling. Now we need to put some membrane over it. So we have a couple of different choices, and we're going to use a pill and stick membrane that we have over here. Matt's going to install it for us now. He did put a primer on this. This is required by the manufacturer before we put this membrane down. This membrane serves all three of those purposes that we just talked about. It can work as a waterproofer, it can work as a crack isolation, and it can work as a sound reduction membrane. That sound reduction part is very, very popular in apartments and condo projects where, sound's a big problem when you got neighbors that are living that close, and a lot of architects specify for that. As you can see, it's a pill and stick membrane. He's pulling the back off. He's got a clean surface that he's primed. It's kind of like putting a big sticker on the floor. He started off by peeling back the back a short distance. He's still got the liner underneath it on a part of it, and now he's going to lift this up, and once he lifts it up, he can now reach underneath there and pull out that coating that's covering that sticky back. There you go. He also has a roller that he's going to roll it down with after he's done. So when it comes to sound reduction, there's a couple different tests that they look at for sound reduction, the vibration and the sounds that are made by vibration, like people walking, and then like acoustical sounds. So there's a couple of different ways to measure it, but this particular one will meet that standard of ANSI A108.13. See how he's rolling in, just making sure it's nice and flat. Now we can go back over it with our thin set, and it's like a regular installation that would be over concrete or any other membrane. This is the product he's using right here. We can see on the box. All right, so the next thing we're going to move to is a waterproof membrane, liquid applied waterproof membrane. Also works as a crack isolation. These are very popular. You guys have probably used these in the past. We're going to dump out a little bit of material. With these, the manufacturer will often say, use a certain nap roller with them to get out the right amount. But there's some techniques that are involved with that. So we've got a roller here. He's putting out a little bit of material. I want to show you this tool real quick. It's called a wet film gauge. So any of these liquid applied membranes will have certain mill thicknesses that we should reach. I want to kind of show you guys this. This is a gauge to see how much material we are putting out when we put out wet material. Now, if you look, we've got two teeth that are set the same distance apart, and then we have different teeth that are set at different distances. Once Matt puts this material down, he can now take his wet film gauge and stick it in that wet material and see which tooth that it lands on. These tooths have numbers on them, okay? So some manufacturers will want you to have 30 mil thickness. Some might have 25 mil thickness. How do you know you're there? You could use a wet film gauge. So that's what he's doing here. Let's see what you got. Okay, he just lightly went over. I don't know if you guys can see that, but he just lightly went over. Can you see that in the light? Basically, we got a dot right here at 18. You guys see right here, we got a dot here at 18. So if our manufacturer wanted 30, we would realize at this point, hey, we don't have enough material down. It's not going to function correctly. We're going to have to do something a little bit different. So we may want to use our roller in a different way, which is what he's going to try first. So he's just laying it on or applying it a little bit thicker with the roller, and he's going to try it again. All right. So I didn't talk any about this. This is an uncoupling membrane, and also can serve in different capacities, but uncoupling membranes are also talked about in the NTCA reference manual. They basically are constructed in a way that there can be air channels and spaces. Again, it works similar to what that cleavage membrane would work, and that if we have some kind of structural movement that we're attached to, when that movement happens, it's not going to mess up the integrity of the tile that's sitting on it. So this is another type of membrane. So what do we got here?
It's 20, but it's consistent.
All right.
Take a look.
I'm going to examine this right here. Okay. So we put the material in the wet film gauge. We put it on the paper. Now we've moved up to 20 mil thickness. So we're doing a little bit better. But if you guys can see this, I don't know if they can zoom in on the camera, it's just not real uniform, okay? We got some thick spots and we got some thin spots. So what a lot of manufacturers will do or recommend is using a 3/16" notch V-notch trowel, like we have here. And what Matt's going to do is he's going to trowel in one direction with this V-notch trowel. After he does that, he's going to load up the flat side of that trowel and just knock down those ridges. Now he's putting out a gauged amount of material, so he's going to have a more consistent thickness throughout. Again, different manufacturers have different requirements for the mill thickness. You always have to check your manufacturer and see what's required. So he's got his ridges standing up. This is an important part. You want to fold those ridges over. A lot of guys will actually run their trowel the wrong direction. We want to go parallel with those ridges here. See how he's just going to fold them over? And he loaded up a little bit of material. He's not really taking away any material or adding material to it. He's just simply putting a uniform coat over the surface. Very nicely done. I'll get you a fresh gauge here. Nice clean one. All right. So on these gauges, and I'll hand some out at the end, there's all kinds of numbers, and he's looking for the number that he might be shooting for. In this particular instance, we'll just say we're shooting for 30 or somewhere close. All right, we hit 30 that time. So again, basically, we just stick this in the wet material, put it on the paper. We see how that lines up with those numbers. And we make sure we have the right amount of material out to get the job done. All right, I think I'm going to step off stage here. We're going to spin this around. Oh, one thing I was going to say about that liquid applied membrane, sometimes they require reinforcing fabrics to be installed, especially in wet situations in the corners and stuff. Or if we were doing a shower installation and we had to connect to a bonding flange or a clamping ring drain flange, we would need to include some fabric in there in certain situations. So always check with your manufacturer and make sure you're using the fabric when you need to. So this shower, I want you to see here, this is a mock-up of a TCA shower. First thing I want to show you is we've got the proper slope. This is a recessed handicap accessible shower. And if you look in your TCA handbook under B422C, this is basically what it has. We've got a slab over here, an existing slab. Whenever we have a shower installation, not only do we have to have our waterproofing done correctly, but it has to be done with the right amount of slope. We need to have at least 1/4 of an inch per foot, no more than 1/2 inch per foot. And that's what we've got here. Basically, we're coming off of this existing concrete slab down to the drain. If you put a level on that, you've got adequate slope of 1/4 inch per foot. So this particular membrane we're going to use, whenever we're using sheet applied membranes, I don't want to take it from her. See, I've got some right over here, I think. Here, looking for some sheet membrane. Okay, so this sheet membrane, whenever we have these, we always want to make sure that we use the right adhesives. Some of the manufacturers will want you to use very specific adhesives, maybe an unmodified mortar or some other type of adhesive. So make sure that you're always checking with your manufacturer. Also, make sure that you have the right amount of overlap, because some stuff comes in sheets and different manufacturers have different requirements for that overlap. These are great systems. I will say this, we're showing you a lot of different membranes, and one of the things that we do at the NTCA is answer technical questions for our members. And lots of times with these shower systems, especially the surface applied systems, when there are problems, it's because they haven't followed the directions and they've intermixed products, used different manufacturers' products. So they'll go into their storage unit and they'll get a bucket of one manufacturer's waterproofing and get some banding from a different manufacturer and some other product, and they mix it all together. So whenever you're going to do any type of application like that, the first thing I want to show you, though, is she just wet down the surface of this mud bed. The reason she wet that down is because that surface was so porous. If she was just to put her mortar on it, it's going to suck all the moisture out of her mortar and weaken it. Then she's using the flat side of her trowel right now to key in that mortar before she gets to actually spreading it. It's just burning it into the surface, making sure that it's going to adhere really well. We've already got our membrane pre-cut. After she gets this in, she's going to install it. But back to my conversation, whenever you're doing a shower like this, similar to this B422C, you want to take a system approach. Whatever manufacturer you use all their products from start to finish. Have any of you guys done any of these recessed showers before? All right. Have any of you done this particular manufacturer stuff? All right. So, also you want to use the right trowel. This manufacturer actually makes a trowel to go with it, or trowel recommendations that you can use with it. All right, do we have any questions? Right here. Oh, Todd. So Todd said whenever they mix those pieces together, we call those Franken showers. I've heard that before. That's a good term for it. Yeah, you want to be careful with that. Always use the same manufacturer throughout. So whenever we have the shower system here that we've been talking about, we want to not only bring our waterproofing to where the shower door is, it actually calls for waterproofing to go a foot beyond that, a foot beyond the wet area, and that's what we've got here. Basically, this is our high point right here, and basically where our shower door is going to be. We've cut our membrane to not only go across the shower floor, and it's going to attach to the drain. This is basically an integrated bonding flange drain. So the drain has waterproofing that's connected to it. Show them the waterproofing that's connected to that drain, if you don't mind, Melissa. See how it's already connected to the drain, and we're going to fasten this membrane that she just put down to the membrane that was on the drain, connecting the two, making it seamless and waterproofing. So, in all of the shower methods in the TCA handbook, whenever we do waterproofing in showers, it says the waterproofing should be tested before tile work should commence. We travel all over the country and we do educational programs, and it's not a requirement in a lot of places to do that. Basically, what we're talking about is just doing a flood test. Once we've installed that waterproofing, we're going to put a plug in there. We're going to fill it up with water. We're going to see if it holds water. We want to find out if we're going to have any problems before we hang $10,000 worth of tile on it, right? So, super easy test, and actually is a requirement whenever we're doing shower systems. Now, we're going to put some banding here on the wall. Again, we have to have the manufacturer's overlap. This might be your banding. I might have grabbed it. I don't know. I think I'm moving stuff around when they're not looking a little bit. Again, she's keying that mortar into the wall. She's working out all of the ridges in here, getting all the air out, doing a great job. She's obviously done that before. So, all right, what kind of questions we got? Question?
Yeah, I have a question, Rob. Back on that other side, you were talking about that wet film stuff.
Wet film gauge, yeah.
Yeah, and you called it a mill. What is a mill?
It's a thickness measurement, and basically the way that we can check that thickness is with the wet film gauge.
Well, how much is a mill? Do you know?
I believe it's metric, isn't it, Mark?
Well, it's pretty small. It's 1/1000th of an inch.
1/1000th of an inch. Okay.
That's why we can't judge it by eye, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we got a wet film gauge here. A mill is 1/1000th of an inch. Okay. So if the manufacturer's calling for 30 of them, that would be 30/1000th of an inch. Again, we can't see that, so we'd have to use a wet film gauge. All right, so they're basically, stand back and let them see what you're doing here. She's tied in the membrane that's on the drain to the membrane that she's installed to this mud bed. She's also going to install membrane that's this membrane that's on the drain will go up the wall here, and it actually fits in this corner right here. So she'll have to get mortar behind that and put that mortar in there. So far, in some of the programs that we've done earlier, I don't know if you guys saw the mud that we did, but yesterday we were floating wall mud. We floated this little piece of floor mud right here. We showed how to do that. We also showed how to do some self-leveling and some cementitious patch. We had a dip. She's kind of folding those corners there, getting it ready to bend right into the corner for banding. All right, see how she's using that sponge, getting that dust off, getting it ready to go. Put a key in that mortar and start spreading. That's a great question. The question was, could that dust be a bond breaker? It definitely can be. Not only a bond breaker, but it also can weaken the mortar itself. Like I said, in the same way when we were talking about the mud bed being so absorbent and actually drawing the moisture out of the mortar and weakening it, same thing with this concrete board. And some fiber cement board manufacturers actually recommend that for every installation, to wet down that surface of that fiber cement board before you start keying in. Keying in, of course, is using the flat side of our trowel to burn that mortar into that surface before we start spreading it. Doing the same thing on the floor, just keying in that mortar to the existing membrane that she just put down in order to lay her banding over it. I like this overhead camera. You can look down and see what's going on. All right, I'm going to pass out some wet film gauges. Cindy, you get one? You want one? Who wants a wet film gauge? I like it. You guys are into it.
No, not millimeter.
All right, I don't know. We're learning. Question.
Water resistant material that they put on the wall instead of membrane.
Water-resistant material they put on the wall. So the question is, can I use water-resistant material? What material are you talking? What material? Okay. I'm not sure if I understand the question. Okay. So one thing I will say to this, I want everyone to know, is a lot of people think that tile and grout might be waterproof, and it can be waterproof in the sense that it's not hurt by water, but we should not expect it to be our waterproofing. Water can go around tiles, go through grout joints, get behind installations. The way I used to describe it to my guys is this thing needs to be completely watertight before we put any tile on it. The tile itself is just superficial. Okay? So this is where the real work is being done on the waterproofing. It's underneath. We can't depend on the tile and the grout to do that waterproofing for us. Anybody else need a wet film gauge? All right, quick review. We use pill and stick membrane. That particular pill and stick membrane we use can be used for crack isolation. You know, if we have a crack in the floor and we tile directly over that crack, it's going to telegraph through and it can create problems. What we basically have is two pieces of concrete that are moving independently of one another. So in order to bridge that, we want to put that membrane over it and allow those two pieces to move and not mess up the integrity of the tile above it. We also need to think about putting a sealant joint above that instead of hard grouting above that existing crack, actually using 100% silicone and creating a sealant joint. Also, we talked about sound reduction and the different types of sound reduction with that pill and stick. The manufacturers of different membranes for crack isolation membranes will have requirements on what's covered and what's not covered. So some joints in concrete would not be covered, no matter what. And what I mean by that is if we have a joint where there's not in-plane movement, where the joint just doesn't open and close, but it's actually heaving and going up and down, that's not going to be one that we can fix with crack isolation membrane. That's one that we're going to have to honor by bringing through the tile work itself. Also, some of them will only be for certain size cracks. So you always have to check with the manufacturer and make sure that you're using an appropriate one. With the waterproofing, the liquid applied waterproofing, the manufacturer will usually give you a guideline of how to install it, but you can use your wet film gauge to check it. That technique that we saw Matt do so well with the 3/16" V-notch, a lot of manufacturers will recommend that, where he trials in one direction, loads up the flat side of his trowel, knocks those ridges over, and comes back and checks the thickness. Gives a real uniform thickness over it. And then sheet membranes. Big thing with sheet membranes is don't intermix them. Make sure you're using the right adhesive whenever you're installing it. Making sure you're using the right banding or overlap. You can see they're doing that there. They've got the right amount of overlap and banding. Okay, what questions we got? We're going to have to get this thing off the stage. Does anybody have any questions? Did everybody get a wet film gauge? You've been a great audience, guys. I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to go down to our booth. Our booth is down at 2862, National Tile Contractors Association. If any of you guys are tile contractors, come down. We want to talk to you and tell you about all the great benefits of being a member and how by being a member you can get this reference manual, which is so wonderful. This is a terrific resource. It's set up in a problem, cause, cure format. So if you got a problem, you can look in there and it'll give you the list of causes that it could be and how to cure those problems. All right? Thank you, guys.